Hello, I'm Oliver Jeffers, and today's creative conversation is with probably the most famous living astronaut on the planet. Well, temporarily. I don't mean temporarily the most famous, but he's temporarily on the planet. Chris Hadfield. Chris has completed 3 space missions since 1995, including a 5-month stay on the International Space Station in 2012, which made him a household name with his regular tweets from the voyage and his iconic performance of David Bowie's Space Oddity, which is over 50 million views on YouTube. That's a lot of views. And when he's not being an astronaut, Chris is also a fighter pilot, a musician, and engineer. And since he's been back on Earth, Chris has become a best-selling author and speaker and travels the world using his experience in space to help us learn more about how we can protect this planet Earth. So I'm very pleased to welcome him to our conversation today and find out what he has to say to us about how his life and experiences in space, how they might help the rest of us make our world a little bit better. So Chris, how are you?
I'm well, Oliver. Nice. That was a lovely summary of things I've been up to. I'm doing well and as busy as can be, as you mentioned. I count myself very lucky, and I'm very happy to be talking to you today, Oliver.
Had you always known that that was your I suppose your path defined pretty early on? Did you have a clear idea from a young age that this was the direction that you wanted to go?
I knew in my heart what really made me excited. You know, like I could look at all the different jobs. I see what my parents did, what other people's parents did, what my teachers did. And some of those things I could just see, well, that's, they're making money, but that's not a job that I'd want to do. But to be able to fly a rocket ship, to be able to command a spaceship, to be able to explore out beyond the atmosphere of the Earth, to be able to walk on the moon or do a spacewalk, all of those things, I just thought, wow, that's the coolest thing ever. If I can do that, that's what I want to do. And then my big problem was, how do I change who I am? How do I turn myself into somebody who could maybe go do those things? And so that's what my task was, to deliberately learn things and study and practice and change who I was,
Yeah.
so that maybe someday someone would trust me to fly a spaceship. But what really matters is, what are you going to do today? What are you going to do in the next hour? What's the next thing that you're
Yeah.
going to do? And if you can somehow have a look at the big idea of what you're trying to do, but then break it down into, hey, what should I do tonight? What book should I read this weekend? What food should I eat? Then suddenly your dreams are really changing who you are, because you're making different choices. And that's how I became an astronaut, by the little choices, not my big ideas, but what book should I read? What should I study? What should I think about in school? How should I exercise or not? Those were all my little
Yeah.
choices that eventually turned me into the person who got to fly in space 3 times. It's really cool to stand at the base of the rocket and look up at this machine that's going to take you to space, because suddenly it feels like your rocket, but there's still stuff to do. And then when you get in and you're strapped in, you're still not in space yet. And even when the engines are lighting and starting to, jam you off the surface of the Earth, you're still just sort of on your way. And the actual moment, Oliver, is when the engines shut off. When they've pushed you and got you going super fast. The speeds are incredible. 5 miles a second, 28,000 kilometers an hour, 25 times the speed of sound. But suddenly, after being crushed and shaken in your seat, the engines shut off and you're weightless and you're in space. That's when you're an astronaut. And that's when you really feel like, okay, all of that work has paid off, and now the real adventure begins.
Can you explain to me in your words what you think the overview effect, what it is and what it does to people?
There was a guy who wrote a book back in the late 60s, early 70s, and he called it the overview effect. But he never flew in space, so he was just guessing. But imagine if you just launched on a rocket ship, and you've unstrapped out of your chair and you've pulled yourself over to the window, and now in one glance you can see from Belfast to Rome to Stockholm in Sweden, and you can see the Alps, and you can see all of Ireland and Great Britain. You can just see it all out your window. And 5 minutes from now, you can see Africa. And 30 minutes from now, you're over Australia. What would that make you think? How would that make you feel?
Yeah.
And then if you go around the world 16 times a day, every single day, for day after day after day, when you came back to Earth, how would you see the Earth then? You know, when you look up at the blue of the sky, or you look around at people from all over the place, it just improves your understanding of the world. It deepens your sense of wonder and awe, I think. And so for some people, it's only a little bit. You know, it only affects them a little bit. Some people, it just makes them cry, and because it's so beautiful. And I think that's what that person was trying to understand when they wrote that book, and they called it the overview effect. It affects people differently, but it's very much how your understanding of the world and its place in the universe, how that affects you as a person.
And spending that long in space, did it affect the way you perceived time, both while you were there, like during the average day, but then also just the time of your own lifespan and the time of ages and eras and civilization? Has it had altered the way in which time makes sense to you?
Well, yes, a couple different ways. Number one is obviously if you're going around the world every 92 minutes, that means you get a sunrise, and then 46 minutes later you get a sunset, then another sunrise, another sunset. You get 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets a day. So that's kind of screws up your notion of time.
Yeah.
Is it morning or is it night? Or so it's not related to the sun and the normal patterns anymore. So you actually have to choose what time it is, because you could choose the time in Australia, or the time in Ireland, or the time in America. And so we actually choose London, England, just because it was sort of a compromise time. So there's that piece, in that time becomes a little more arbitrary. But the other piece is maybe more significant, Oliver, and that is from the spaceship, you can really start to see the time of the whole world, like the age of the whole world. You can see where Africa and South America used to fit together millions and millions, 200 million years ago, and how India crashed up in and pushed up the highest mountains in the world, the Himalayas. You can see where Ireland and Scotland used to fit together with Canada, with Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. And suddenly you can start to see the actual age of the world itself, which is 4.5 billion years. And it's really hard from sitting at your home, no matter where you live, to try and get a sense of 4.5 billion. It's such an incredibly big number. But from a spaceship, that was one of my perceptions that really changed, was to start to understand just how incredibly old the world is.
But as individuals, what are you encouraging people to do to sort of help change the way that they think about things, or even their own actions, just to improve their individual lives, but also the collective lives of society?
Well, I think it's really important to remember that what you do matters. You as an individual person, what you do matters. And you can easily sort of say, oh, that's somebody else's problem, or I'm just one person, or I'm just from a small country, or whatever. But nothing gets changed in the world except when a small group of people decide this is something we should change. And that's all it normally takes, is a small group of people with a really strong will, who then decide, you know what, we're gonna make something different. We're gonna invent something different. We're gonna change how we behave. We're gonna do something like that. And so if you bring that back upon yourself, then what in the world makes you mad, or irritates you, or you don't think is right? What is it about the world that you don't think is just or going the correct direction? And how can you use your energy to try and affect that thing? How can you address some of the problems that are important to you? That's how the world gets
Yeah.
changed. And that's what I think everyone should be focusing on.
I think
You
you're
know,
right.
what's important to me and how can I try and change that?
You know,
And so you're probably the first thing that you're going to have to change is yourself. You know, you're going to have to learn about something, or you're going to have to change your behaviors. Like, I don't know, what food do I eat, or how do I use power, or how do I, what is it that my habits are?
yeah.
And once you've learned and changed yourself, then how can you start to maybe affect the opinions and activities of other people?
Mm.
That's how all great change happens in the world. And I think the most important thing to recognize is that it's an individual, personal decision, and your decisions really matter. How can the things that I'm doing, how can that improve the quality of life for as many people as possible in a sustainable way? How can I do that? What am I going to choose to do today? And how can that improve the quality of life for as many people as possible in a sustainable way? And if you just start applying that metric to your own choices, and sure, you got to live your life and you're not going to be perfect, but try and, be as true to your own dreams as you possibly can. And that's, to me, that's where change happens.
Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic about the future of civilization?
I'm realistic about it. And part of that is understanding time, as you mentioned, Oliver. Kind of everybody wants the most important time ever in history to be while they're alive because it helps you feel significant, right? And that's why people hold up signs that say the world is ending because, the world may have been here for 4.5 billion years, but it all was some sort of big imaginary pyramid, all building up to this moment in time, which is the only real time that has ever mattered. And that's silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Totally. Yeah.
self-aggrandizement and self-importance. So I think you need to have an actual perspective of how old things really are and how some the wicked things the world has been through, the huge asteroid impacts and gigantic volcanic eruptions and big burps coming out of the sun. The world has been through way, way worse things than us. And so you need to have that perspective. And when you look at those, it makes you much more optimistic about the future. We have serious problems to solve right now, but so did our great grandparents, and so did their great grandparents. It's not like life suddenly got harder than it used to be easy. That it just seems harder to us because we're the ones who are alive right now. And I think you see some of that from a spaceship. But as a result, I'm realistically optimistic. We have a lot of work to do, just like everybody else in history always has, and we need to pay attention. Since it's our turn to be pulling on the oars right now, to address our workload so that we leave as good a world as possible for our kids and their kids.
How comfortable or uncomfortable is it wearing the suit that you use to go outside the spaceship?
A spacesuit, it's really not a spacesuit. It's a one-person spaceship,
Huh.
if you think about it,
Yeah.
because it has its own cooling system, its own pressurization system. It's got to keep a bubble of atmosphere around you to keep you alive, and it's got its own communication system. It's even got a jetpack built into it, just in case you go tumbling off into space. So it's not a suit, it's a ship that's just the same shape as your body. And so it's incredibly uncomfortable. It beats you up. You come in from a spacewalk normally bloody because it's worn through your skin in a few places, like on your knees and your shoulder blades and your collarbone and your shoulder blades and your knuckles. And we've had people rip their fingertips or their fingernails off their fingertips inside their spacesuit. It's a very, very uncomfortable suit of clothing, but it's the best thing there is. It's the only way that you can actually get out and personally experience space. And as you say, I've done 2 spacewalks and spent about 15 hours out alone in the universe. And it was a magnificent 15 hours. And yeah, there was contamination in my suit that blinded both my eyes, but that only lasted a half hour and it cleared eventually.
When you
So,
put it like that,
you know,
yeah, what's the big
yeah,
deal?
so nothing comes for free. Well, you can see thousands of miles in every direction. So yeah, you could. It's like, here. Let me just grab this. If you're on board a spaceship, it's as you know the world is whatever 25,000 miles around. You're only 400 kilometers above the world. So if you put your eyeball right here, that's about what you can see from a spaceship. You can see all the way from here to here to here to here, and but obviously you can see all of the edges and the curve and the distance. But you can see the curvature of the Earth from from any port, or if you go to any place that has power lines that are going across a big wide lake, you can see in the distance how the power lines disappear because of the curve of the world. One of the best places, Lake Pontchartrain down in New Orleans. You can actually, it's a big salty lake, and you can see the curvature of the Earth just standing there on the shoreline. But from a spaceship, well, yeah, you're looking at a ball. That's the only thing you can see.
Well, thank you very much for that, Chris. Enlightening and inspiring as ever. And now we'll come to the time where we are going to issue, or rather, you're going to issue a challenge to the school children who are out there listening to this in some ways that they can contribute to this project. So, what have you come up with for us?
One of the things, Oliver, that you really are lucky enough to have when you're an astronaut is to see everywhere on the world. Every little town, every village, every big city, every lake, every continent. It's just so gorgeous. You really get to see your Earth and your place on Earth and the places that you've been. And I thought it would be a fun, creative challenge for me to be able to see and hear about your place on Earth. And so what I want you to do is just get your phone or your tablet or whatever it is that you can record things with. And I want you to create a short film and to tell us just a little bit about who you are and the area that you live, the place that you live in. And tell us something about what you hope for or what you want in that place, your part of the world. Maybe for the whole planet, because that's a place that you live in, but or maybe just the specific little piece of the world that your camera and your eyeballs are capturing. So what is it that you want for the future of your place on Earth and the planet, and how you can help to achieve it? So it could be about, I don't know, how every time you go for a walk, you always pick up at least one piece of litter, or about how you've changed some of your habits so that you're thinking about the whole world, or you're changing your things that you do, or maybe a new invention you're aware of, like how electricity is being generated, or some sort of new electric car, or maybe about how you're going to change who you are so that you can get on a spaceship and go around and around the world itself, and maybe turning yourself into an astronaut so that the view that you get can help you change life here down on the surface of the world. It's totally up to you and your imagination to decide how you want to make that short film. And now, when you've completed your film, you can just upload it, and the place you should upload it is to the Our Place in Space website. And then the folks there will gather it all together, and everybody's hopes and dreams for the future, and a chance to show each other everything that we're really doing to help those dreams come true. And so I just to remember, I'm going to give you 3 tips to help you complete the challenge. So number 1, when you're thinking about what you should record about, dream big. I mean, when I was 9, I decided to turn myself into an astronaut. And I'm a kid from Canada. We didn't even have astronauts, and we didn't have rocket ships, and we didn't have NASA. But I thought, things are going to change. And the only thing I can really change is myself. So I'm going to think big. And that's where I started. So when you're making up your Place on Earth video, dream big. The second is be clear. Try and make your idea as easy to understand and as succinct and concise as you possibly can. Imagine someone else listening to you, and how are you going to let them understand you as quickly and clearly as possible? So, number one, dream big. Number two, be clear. And number three, have fun. This is your life. Everything I do, always, I do it to have fun. And some of the craziest, most fun ideas become the very best ones. So don't be afraid to let your imagination run wild as you record and tell everybody about your place on Earth.
Thank you, Chris. I'm already thinking about what I can do now. Get my kids and we'll go out with their phone and record something. So thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with the rest of your day and your future mission of inspiring young and old minds alike around the world.
Thank you, Oliver. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you as well, and I can't wait to see what everybody comes up with telling me about their place on Earth.